Before watching this video, it is recommended that you first watch my review on Pac-Man Fever. With that said, we continue our little marathon here by taking a look at Pac-Man World 2, which was developed and published mostly by Namco. The game is of course a sequel to the original Pac-Man World on the PlayStation. Now, to be completely honest here, I have never even played the first Pac-Man World. From what I've seen, it looks like it could be an enjoyable 3D platformer. In fact, I never even played Pac-Man World 2 until about high school, and that's only because my stepbrother had a copy of the game and let me try it out. So let's find out together if Pac-Man World 2 is worth playing. Our story begins in the peaceful Pac Village, where late at night we see the four ghosts, Pinky, Inky, Blinky, and Clyde, goofing around a large tree at the center of the village. The ghosts end up pulling off these 5 golden fruit off the tree, which ends up releasing a great evil ghost named Spooky. Upon Spooky's release, he commands the ghost to follow under his rule, as he plans to destroy all the Pac people. The following morning, Pac-Man wakes up and is told of what happened last night. Professor Pac informs Pac-Man about Spooky's past. It turns out that during ancient times, the Pac people were in a constant war with Spooky, until one day a wizard created a potion that turned 5 fruit into golden fruit. With these fruit, a knight named Sir Pac-a-Lot fought with Spooky and was able to seal him under the tree. Knowing what's at stake, Pac-Man sets out to retrieve the 5 golden fruit and seal Spooky back. This is a far better story than what Pac-Man Fever had, and this time it's one that I actually like. All the game needed was a simple setup, and that's exactly what it is, and it works. While the backstory on Spooky might not be necessary, I really like it as it helps provide some decent motivation and helps make Spooky a more interesting villain. Spooky is awesome. Sure, the name Spooky isn't a very creative or intimidating name, but he makes up for that with his presence. Spooky himself is just plain evil and wants nothing more than the destruction of the Pac people, and honestly works great as a villain. So much so that I wouldn't mind seeing him in later Pac-Man games. Plus, this is Pac-Man. He doesn't need to be super scary, he just needs to be fun and effective, which he is. Besides, the ghosts don't have too much in personality, which is fine. I like that they're in the game, and they fill the job of underlings quite well. Pac-Man himself really doesn't have much of a personality, and that's alright, as giving him one could end up horribly. He just has a constant smile on his face and is ready to stop any evil that gets in his way. There are a few other characters Pac-Man will run into, like Pac Ranger, Handy Pac, and Sue, who really don't contribute much and are, for the most part, just meant to help Pac-Man get further in his journey. In fact, the only interesting character Pac-Man runs into is an evil tree named Wormwood, who tries to get him lost in a maze and is the evil brother of the tree that sealed Spooky. I don't quite know how a tree could have an evil brother, but it's a small extra touch that I'm okay with. Like I said, it's a simple, easy to follow, and effective story that sure could have used a little bit more personality in its characters, but regardless, it still works perfectly fine for me. Pac-Man World 2 is a 3D platformer that has some collectathon aspects to it. You will play as Pac-Man and can access different levels from a world map. The world map itself is nicely laid out and really gives you the feeling of progression and going on an adventure around this island. In fact, the world map is kind of broken up between different lands, like the forest, treetops, snow mountain, lava, ocean, and ghost island. To progress through the game, all you have to do is reach the end of the level and go on to the next one. Thankfully, the first level you start in is Pac Village, where it only has one enemy ghost, some smaller enemies, and some non-moving spikes that will hurt you. The main point of this level is to give the player a safe place to learn the controls, which are a little different from most other platformers. Sure, Pac-Man can jump and hang off of ledges, but he can also rev roll and butt bounce. Butt bouncing is a surprisingly effective way to get around in the game. When used correctly, it can help you reach slightly higher areas, break boxes, activate buttons, and defeat enemies. Bouncing is fast and has some nice fluidity to it and can be used almost endlessly. Not only that, but bouncing off of enemies feels great and doesn't hurt Pac-Man's momentum, making it an enjoyable and effective way to take out enemies while trying to play through the level. Sure, Pac-Man can't double jump, but he can instead use his kick in mid-air, which helps give him a slight boost in height, and can also be used to hit objects above him, and for the most part works quite well too. Then there is the rev roll, which is most often used for going up slopes at high speeds. The rev roll makes sense for Pac-Man, but I don't quite enjoy using it too often. For some reason, I have a bit of a hard time controlling Pac-Man when he's rolling, which makes it a bit intimidating to use over small platforms. Thankfully though, you can immediately stop Pac-Man's rev roll with a simple touch of a button, which kinda makes up for the awkward controls you have when rev rolling. In normal levels, you simply have to reach the end to beat them, as you use Pac-Man's skills to get past mostly platforming sections. Almost all these types of levels I find to be enjoyable and rather complement Pac-Man's controls. Some of these levels even do interesting things with the themes, like in Tree Tops, when the first level introduces bounce pads with lots of bottomless pits, while the next level adds buzzsaws, and the third level adds fire. Then there's Snow Mountain, where Pac-Man climbs up a frozen river, then outruns an avalanche, and then skates down the mountain. Speaking of which, Ice River Run is easily one of my least favorite levels in the game, as the ice physics are quite awful. Simply touching the ice causes Pac-Man to completely lose control, and has no real way to recover from it. Thankfully though, there aren't too many levels with ice physics in them, and really it's in this level where they're at their worst. What helps is that there are some checkpoints throughout levels, so if you die, you simply start back at the last checkpoint. Plus, these checkpoints are really needed in later levels that start getting more challenging, like the lava levels, with Volcanic Panic being the first one to really start giving me a hard time, with it having more of a focus on rev rolling combined with some moving platforms. Hell, Magma Opus is rather hard too, with some small platforms and an annoying section where you have to hit some switches, as well as being a place where the camera can be a bit frustrating. Controlling the camera is rather okay, but in tight spots it can be rather finicky and can easily get stuck in frickin' walls. Plus, it never really lets you see down gaps very well either. Take for example the level Nightcrawling, which is for the most part a fun and enjoyable level, with my only issue being this large gap here. From my perspective, it doesn't look like you can make it to that section down there. But lo and behold, the game actually expects you to perform a suicidal rev roll and hope you make it. Which you do, but still, this is kinda ridiculous. The early forest levels are great too and are quite easy, and heck, the Ghost Bayou has a fun concept to it as well, with Wormwood and his maze. It's in these levels where you come across Pac-Dot chains that will have Pac-Man auto-eat them in some fun fashions, and the Metal Ball power-up. With the Metal Ball power-up, Pac-Man can kill certain enemies, sink to the bottom of ponds, and be immune to fire and lava, and it proves itself to be a pretty useful power-up. For the most part, you'll be able to kill enemies with your butt bounce, but Ghost on the other hand will require Pac-Man to first eat power pellets before he can kill them, and without the power pellet, they can kill Pac-Man in one hit. In these levels, you can also find a special item that will take Pac-Man to classic-style Pac-Man sections, that once you beat, will be unlocked for you to play again in the arcade in Pac Village. To vary up the gameplay, there are other types of levels. First, we have the skating levels, where Pac-Man is either on ice skates or roller skates, continuously going forward in the level. These are some fun levels, as they are fast-paced and control rather well. Blade Mountain is actually a good level to play to stock up on extra lives, which isn't a bad idea, while Haunted Boardwalk isn't as great. My biggest problem mostly has to do with the falling platforms combined with some small logs, as Pac-Man seems to respond weird to platforms falling when you just lose your momentum, which gets rather frustrating for me. Then we have the ocean levels, which are honestly my least favorite. First off, they're the levels where it's just Pac-Man swimming, and the swimming controls aren't bad, but when things start to get cluttered on the screen, it can be a bit hard to tell when you might get hit or not. Plus, these levels just go on for far too long. Though I would say I like them a whole lot more than the underwater levels in Crash 3. The submarine levels, however, are a bit better since now Pac-Man can shoot at things coming for him. I just don't find these levels to be as fun as the platforming ones. To be fair, most of the levels in the game are platforming ones, with very few of them being underwater levels or skating levels, which is a good thing to me. In all the levels there are items you can collect, such as fruits, Pac-Dots, and tokens. Tokens are used to unlock games in the arcade in the Pac Village, which is a good enough reason for me to want to go after them, while collecting the fruit and Pac-Dots just seems to be a bragging thing, as they don't seem to unlock anything and are just there to 100% a level. Don't get me wrong, it feels good to collect all the fruit in the early levels, but in the later levels, I really don't have much of a reason to do so. Plus, getting all the fruit in a level will just sometimes have you break certain chests that end up having more fruit or Pac-Dots in them. After you've beaten a level, you can then replay it in a time trial mode, where you will have to beat the whole level in one go, in the shortest amount of time you can. Beating these doesn't unlock anything either, and seems to just be a personal challenge for some players. And to me, the idea of trying to play some of the later levels in one go sounds awful enough for me to just avoid the time trial sections altogether. Boss fights start off pretty great, with Blinky's frog being an enjoyable fight that puts Pac-Man's skills to good use. However, the rest of the ghosts just end up using the same type of ghost robot and just take place in very similar arenas. The first two aren't bad, they're just disappointing in their lack of creativity, although Pinky's robot helps expose the issue the game has with projectiles, as when Pac-Man is hit by a snowball he ends up just flying across the screen. There's a similar issue like this in Magma Opus with this fucking asshole and his rocks. Thank goodness there aren't too many projectile throwing enemies in the game. Clyde, who I forgot to mention, is for some reason switched with Blinky here. Yeah, Blinky's supposed to be the red one, and Clyde is supposed to be the orange one. How the hell did they fuck this up? I really don't know. Has by far the worst boss fight in the game, with a horrible arena, annoying attack pattern, and a rather awful way of hitting him. Fortunately, the Mega Whale and Spooky boss fights make up for this. Visually, Pac-Man World 2 looks pretty good. Sure, it's not amazing graphically, but the cartoon art style is quite charming. The earlier levels are quite colorful and have some nice detail to them, with the treetops really making you feel like you're in a forest filled with the tallest trees, Snow Mountain complementing the ice and snow theme well, and lava giving the volcano an ancient ruins feel to it. Heck, even if I don't really like the underwater levels that much, they look great with the colorful coral reefs and the blue ocean sea. Character models look great too, as they are well detailed and have some nice animations. The cartoon art style really shines when it comes to the enemies, with their rounder looking bodies and sometimes exaggerated faces, like the adorable rams and the funny looking sharks. Spooky even looks great, with this simple but effective design that really doesn't feel out of place either. There's also some good music in the game, with plenty of upbeat, cheerful tunes that feel like they really belong in a Pac-Man game. All the music has this arcade feel to it, and some even do a decent job of creating some atmosphere like the theme in Night Crawling. So, would I recommend Pac-Man World 2? Yes, I would if you enjoy 3D platformers. The game is quite charming and has a really nice setup and villain. Pac-Man controls, for the most part, are great too, and make the platforming fun and rewarding. Don't get me wrong, some of the later levels do get pretty hard, and you might have to grind up some lives, and I'm not really a huge fan of the underwater levels. But as long as you enjoy platformers and just focus on getting to the end of the levels, then it's quite fun, minus one particular boss fight. I wouldn't bother with collecting the fruit in the game, as that can make things quite frustrating. This isn't my favorite 3D platformer for the PlayStation 2, but I did quite enjoy most of the game and found the gameplay to be pretty solid. It at least makes me curious about the first game, and has me looking forward to the next game in the Pac-Man World series. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this review and found it to be rather informative. If you'd like to see more reviews, please check out my channel. And please don't forget to subscribe. And if there are any other PS2 games you'd like to see me review in the future, please leave a suggestion down below. Well, I'm MCB the PS2 Gamer, and I'll see you guys next time.